So good afternoon, everybody. I'm going to call the meeting to order. This is our public session meeting, Tuesday, February 21st. Attendance, we have Trustee Chin is just down the hall. I've just left her, so I know she's here physically. And Student Trustee Hawkins is, I don't have regrets, so.
She just sent regrets.
Oh, she's on the phone?
Regrets.
Oh, sent regrets. Okay, thank you very much. I'm looking for a motion to approve the agenda for the meeting tonight. Trustee Leclerc, Trustee Sipcar, all those in support of the agenda. That's carried. And a motion to convene to private session. Trustee Leclerc, Trustee Cook, all those in support. That's carried. Thank you very much. Welcome to the continuation of our public meeting, which began at 5:30, and then we convened into private session. This is the February board meeting, and I just wanted to emphasize that February is Black History Month in Canada, and Black History Month is a time to honor the contributions and rich legacy of Black Canadians and their communities. The GEDDSB is pleased to acknowledge and celebrate the very important role that African Canadians have played in the cultural, political, social, and economic progress of our community in the past and the present. The GEDSB extends our gratitude to Irene Moore-Davis, Chantel Browning-Morgan, and Dr. Christina Simons from the Essex County Black Historical Research Society for their authorship and the locally developed Roads to Freedom resources that are available to all educators in our system. We would also like to thank Amina Abdul, Superintendent Josh Canty, Chantel Browning-Morgan, and Dr. Andrew Allen for their contribution to the Black Excellence Speakers Series that Walkerville Collegiate has been hosting throughout the month. We remain committed to fulfilling the priorities and actions of our anti-Black racism strategy and continuing our work towards creating a just, inclusive, equitable, and diverse environment for everyone in the GEDSB. So thank you for joining us for our February meeting. And to go back to our agenda, we did approve the agenda when we started at 5:30. Then we convened to private session, and I would now like to invite Trustee Leclerc to do the land acknowledgement, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We acknowledge that we are on the land and surrounded by water, originally inhabited by Indigenous people who have traveled this area since time immemorial. This territory is within the lands honored by the Wampum Treaties, agreements between the Anishinaabe, Haudenosaunee, Lenni, Lenape, and the allied nations to peacefully share and care for the resources around the Great Lakes. Specifically, we would like to acknowledge the presence of the Three Fires Confederacy, the Ojibwe, the Ottawa, and the Potawatomi, and the Huron-Wendat peoples. We are dedicated to honoring Indigenous history and culture while remaining committed to moving forward respectfully with all First Nations, Inuit, and Métis.
Thank you very much, Trustee Leclerc. And now we do have special order of the day. I would ask the director if she would do that. And would you please stand? Everyone would please stand for the special orders of the day.
Jaden Santu fought a valiant battle against cancer right up to his final day in December. He was in grade 9 at Vincent Massey Secondary School after graduating from Northwood Public School, and he inspired everyone who knew him. Jaden never allowed a disease to define or limit him. He always enjoyed hanging out with his friends in the park, playing Pokemon Go and Rocket League when he wasn't at home watching TV with his mom. At school, Jaden worked hard. He gave the best he could both academically and athletically. He was a happy-go-lucky kid, caring and fun to be around. His treatments were a challenge to his introduction to high school, but he had a positive attitude and he was setting out an academic pathway. In a short time, though, he had a lasting impact and will be remembered fondly at both Massey and Northwood. Please join me in a moment of silence. And now a tribute to Andrew Farron, a grade 7 student at Tecumseh Vista Academy, who was always looking for an opportunity to make someone laugh. He bravely maintained his sense of humor while battling leukemia for 3.5 years. Andrew enjoyed playing pranks and joking around with his friends, teachers, family, and caregivers. They will always remember his infectious laugh and recall his innate honesty. You always knew how he was feeling. Andrew was very close to his siblings, Caitlin and Chase, who were always by his side. He had many friends who laughed along as he bowled, played basketball, and video games. His presence, as well as his absence, has had a great impact on Tecumseh Vista Academy community. Please join me in a moment of silence. Please be seated.
Thank you, Director Kelly, and our sincere sympathy to the families of Jaden and Andrew. Thank you. I should have mentioned that student trustee Paige Hawkins has joined us. No, has not joined us by phone. Okay, something happened. Okay. I guess it didn't work. Sorry about that. So, Trustee Hawkins has not been able to join us and did send regrets earlier. Item E, does any trustee have a declaration of conflict of interest for this agenda? Nope, seeing none. Item F, actions of the board meeting in private session.
Thank you. So we have two. The first one is G1 under new business. Can I have a mover, please? Trustee Burgess, a seconder. Trustee McKinley, all in favor? That passes. The second one is G2. Trustee Leclerc, Trustee Sipcar, all in favor? Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Cook. Item G, approval of the minutes from the meeting of January 17th, and I believe Trustee Burgess gave us notice that there was a typo that got corrected, so it says, as you have them in your package, a motion from Trustee Leclerc and Trustee Sipcar. Are there any other errors or omissions from the minutes? All those in support? Any opposed? That's carried. Thank you very much. Business arising from the minutes. So, Trustee Sipcar.
Yes, Madam Chair, I'd like to motion to refer item L2 that has been tabled. I'd like to motion to refer it to Policy Committee. And I'll leave it at that.
Sorry, I didn't quite hear it.
Oh, sorry. A motion to refer item L2 that is currently tabled, referring it to Policy Committee.
It's not L2 on tonight's agenda.
No, previous L2 on the
Previous
yeah.
L2. Okay, do we have a seconder for that motion? Trustee Burgess? Do you want to speak to that at all?
I don't believe it's debatable, but I don't know if I can speak to it. But
Right.
I don't need to. I don't think it's debatable. A motion to refer.
Okay. So the motion is to refer, if you look at your minutes, is it in this package?
Yep, it's on
Okay.
page 9 and 10.
Thank you, that'll help. To refer that back to the policy committee. Okay. All those in support? Any opposed? One opposed. That motion carries. Thank you very much. We have two presentations tonight. The first is the student trustee presentation.
Thank you. Good evening, trustees, superintendents, and Director Kelly. Happy February. Last Tuesday, Student Senate met virtually for our February meeting. Senators highlighted their school's Black History Month initiatives. Haley Chase, student senator from Walkerville Collegiate, has organized the Black Excellence Speaker Series featuring local educators. Additionally, many schools are taking time during their morning announcements to play music and share important contributions and achievements of Black individuals throughout history. Student trustee elections for the 2023-24 school year will be held this Friday. Thank you to Superintendent Canty for providing the voting delegates with unconscious bias training to help prepare them for the task of electing next year's student trustees. We are encouraging students from across the GEDSB to provide us with any questions they may have for candidates, which can be used during the town hall portion of the elections. Paige and I look forward to meeting and mentoring our incoming student trustees. Random Act of Kindness Day was held on Friday, February 17th. This year, Student Senate compiled a week's worth of ideas to encourage random act of kindness, which were posted on the Student Senate Instagram page, which can be found at GCDSB Student Senate on Instagram. For the second year, Student Senate is participating in Tampon Tuesday on March 7th. It's an Ontario-wide initiative facilitated by the United Way Windsor-Essex and the Windsor and District Labour Council. Held in conjunction with International Women's Day, the event is a menstrual hygiene product drive that aims to promote menstrual equity and increase access to period products. Student Senate is encouraging high schools to collect products and/or make monetary donations in support of Tampon Tuesday. This past weekend, Paige and I had the privilege of attending the Ontario Student Trustee Association's Board Council Conference in Ottawa. We participated in several professional development sessions that were incredibly informative and engaging. One of the highlights of the conference was a presentation by the Assembly of Seven Generations on Indigenous culture. The presenter discussed the importance of allowing the Indigenous community to define reconciliation for us. The Ontario Principals Council, Patsy Agard, asked us for our perspective on what safe school environments looks like. We discussed the negative impacts of support staff shortages in our school board and the need to address the issue. Paige and I would like to thank Director Kelly for your continuous support in providing these professional development opportunities through OSTA ACO. We are also grateful to superintendents and trustees for their constant support, and especially to Michelle Marcus for her continued guidance. And I'll also be reading the Student of the Month tonight. The Student of the Month for February is Addison Poloni, a grade 9 student at Essex District High School, an excellent role model for this month's theme of kindness. Addison demonstrates kindness in many different ways. She shows genuine interest when she talks to you, and she showers you with compliments. She is friendly, thoughtful, helpful, and considerate and generous. For Addison, it goes above and beyond getting along well with her peers, holding doors for classmates. She performs acts of kindness without being asked to or expecting anything in return. This shows that she truly cares about the people around her and wants them to be happy. Addison demonstrates kindness daily. Addison's upbeat attitude and joyful personality makes her an enjoyable person to be around and a pleasure to talk to. Supportive of her peers, she encourages them to be the best version of themselves. She's positive and empathetic. Addison knows how to cheer someone up when they're down and pick them up when they fall. She never judges others when they are in a tough situation, instead choosing to help with a solution. Quite simply, Addison consistently treats everyone with kindness and respect, no matter their circumstances. Congratulations, Addison, for being selected by Student Senate as the February Student of the Month. We do have Addison here with us, so we'll present the certificate as well.
Congratulations, Addison, and thank you for our trustee report. You've obviously, both of you, been busy. Yeah, thank you very much. We have a second presentation tonight, and I would like to invite Superintendent Armstrong and Mr. Khan, who's the new manager of the Windsor Essex Student Transportation Services. So welcome.
Sure. Hi, good afternoon, everybody. So firstly, my name is Umair Khan. I've taken over as the general manager for Windsor Essex Student Transportation Services. We've been asked to come do a little bit of a presentation, kind of showing what we do in our area and what we're responsible for. So, yeah, sure. I can start off. So for the presentation overview, we'll talk a little bit about WES, we'll talk about legal structure, our governance structure, operational structure, student transportation funding and expenses, and policy development. So mission statement for WES is Windsor Essex Student Transportation Services is committed to supporting the education of our students by providing safe, effective, and efficient transportation. Membership consists of 4 local coterminous boards, the Greater Essex County District School Board, Windsor Essex Catholic District School Board, Providence, and Viamon. We have a corporate membership agreement, and WES is one of the 34 transportation consortia with school board membership in Ontario. So it's not just one of us, we're one of 34. We provide student transportation to over 29,000 students daily, contracts with 5 operators to deliver student transportation services. Those are our 5 operators: First Student, Switzicardi, GL Stevenson, Sharp Bus Lines, and Vanessa Taylor, who operates out of Peely Island, just by herself. Approximately 49,010 kilometers are driven daily. 466 buses are required to deliver transportation services, 71 single route buses, and 395 multiple route buses. We'll talk a little bit why that is the way it is. Our legal structure, we've been incorporated in 2013 as a corporation without share capital, meaning that we're not a profit corporation. Prior to becoming a separate legal entity, the consortia was an entity created by 4 coterminous boards to provide common administration of transportation since 1998. I'm going to hand it off to Shelley now for her part.
Oh, sorry, I was too fast with that. So as you'll see on this slide, this is the governance structure for the Windsor Essex Student Transportation Services. I'll refer to it as WESTS throughout this presentation. And the Board of Directors, they are responsible for the overall management and governance of WES. And the Board of Directors is comprised of the 4 superintendents of business of the participating boards in the consortium. In terms of the responsibilities of the Board of Directors, their responsibilities include establishing the strategic directions and policies of WES, establishing the operating procedures for the general manager. For example, we say that the general manager is responsible for transportation planning, student discipline on buses, communication with parents, safety procedures, all that operational type work. The Board of Directors is also responsible for approving the budget for WES, fostering and facilitating inter-board cooperation, initiating and overseeing the hire and the evaluation of the general manager, and establishing the cost-sharing formula for the services that are provided. And all of that would be outlined in the membership agreement as part of the consortium. Responsibilities for the Board of Directors also contain or involve monitoring and reporting on transportation implications of program priorities, establishing the organizational structure and the remuneration schedules of the collective agreements associated with WES, establishing and reviewing the administrative and the per pupil operating costs, approving the acquisition of transportation service providers, and reporting to respective boards as required. The way the Board of Directors works is it operates by consensus. If there's an inability to get unanimity on any issue, each board has one equal vote. So it does not necessarily matter about the size of the board, it's one vote per board. And a majority of at least 3 of the 4-member boards prevails. If there are disputes and we can't get to an agreement, then it would go to the board. The board would take it to the directors for each of the boards that participate, and the directors of education at that point would vote. And if it's still unresolved at that point, not that we've ever gone to that situation before, but there are provisions in the membership agreement that permit mediation and arbitration of matters. A couple important points, or an important point, is that all the boards that are members of the consortium are committed to maintaining common transportation policies and procedures amongst all the boards. And what's really important in red is in the membership agreement, if a member board unilaterally proposes a policy change, any adverse financial impacts of that change identified by the Board of Directors on WES or any of the other coterminous boards becomes the sole responsibility of the board that made the change initially up front. So that's a very important piece that we always consider as well.
Next, I'll speak to the operational structure of WES. So operational structure starts off with the general manager, that is myself. Below me, I have a manager of planning and IT services, and below that person, there's a transportation clerk and safety officer. Also below me is a supervisor for routing, special transportation, and administration, and underneath that person there is 4 route planners as well. So we have a total of 8 people running transportation for 32,000 students, approximately. Key legislation, WES operations must adhere to the following laws and regulations: the Highway Traffic Act, the Dangerous Goods Transportation Act, Public Vehicles Act, Motor Vehicle Transport Act, Compulsory Automobile Insurance Act, Environmental Protection Act. We have to consider the parameters of the funding formula set out by the Ministry of Education in the decisions that we do make. So bus capacity, this is important for everybody to understand. If the bus size is 72 passenger, we can safely put 50 students on there, or 44 elementary or 44 secondary on a mini bus, more commonly used for spec ed students. There would be 12 elementary or 10 secondary, but it may be used for other items as well, depending on the situation. When bus loads reach this number, no further courtesy rides will be added. We'll talk about courtesy rides a little bit later in the presentation as well. Some of the challenges that we are currently facing, lack of equipment and lead time to order new equipment. When I'm talking about equipment, I mean buses. Increasing demand for transportation for students with special needs. Obviously, as the school board must know, there's been a general increase with this, and the demand for transportation has increased as well. Bus driver shortages and recruitment. Post-COVID, this has been extremely hard to get drivers into a bus. I know almost every bus company is hiring for drivers right now. We also face inflation and fuel costs. We also have inadequate ministry funding related to the changes that we've encountered recently. And influx of students coming into the Windsor-Essex area. There has been not just students, but people coming into the area as well. Obviously, when they come with their students, with their children as students, it's going to impact transportation as well. I'm going to hand this off to Shelly next. Sorry, Shelly.
So I just wanted to explain a little bit about transportation funding and expenses. This kind of predates my time with the board, but a few several years ago, there was an initiative by the provincial government to undertake an efficiency and effectiveness review of student transportation. And the purpose of the review, as you'll see on the slide, was to try, this is the ministry's perspective, was to establish an equitable approach to reforming student transportation across the province and to minimize the administrative burden for school boards associated with providing safe, reliable, effective, and cost-efficient transportation services. The Ministry of Education selected the review teams, and you'll see from the report, Deloitte was the company that undertook the efficiency and effectiveness reviews. And the intention of these reviews from the ministry really was to identify the best practices and the opportunities for improvement and to provide valuable information to be used to inform future funding decisions. The efficiency and effectiveness review focused on 4 specific areas. It looked at consortium management, policies and practices, routing and technology used, as well as contracting practices. And the results were used by the ministry for reforms of student transportation. They looked at the consortium delivery of student transportation services. They looked at the effectiveness and efficiency of the consortium themselves. And they used the information to study the benchmark cost for a school bus. So in terms, and this was a multi-phase, multi-year project as well, I do want to mention. So when the initial report came out for WES, there were 3 key recommendations. One was to establish the consortium as a separate legal entity. And the ministry, from their perspective, believes that the benefits of having a consortium as a viable business model is to realize efficiencies by doing it in that manner. The second recommendation was to formalize the governance structure. And what that recommendation related to was really trying to separate operations from governance. So the recommendation was that the general manager act as an administrative resource to the board of directors, that the GM provide effective day-to-day management of the organization, and that the board of directors really is to be provided with information from a strategic perspective, and only those items that require approval. Then the third recommendation was to develop a strategic plan, which was developed, and actually we're in the process now of revising that. So WES took all those recommendations, and the ministry, Deloitte came back, and they reviewed the consortium again. And on the final report, the consortium was rated as highly effective in all 4 of those areas that the ministry undertook the efficiency and effectiveness review in the first place. Transportation funding is provided under Section 190 of the Education Act. It is not a requirement. The Education Act indicates that school boards may provide transportation for pupils, and when a school board does decide to provide that transportation, then the ministry will provide the funding to deliver those services. So I think that's kind of important because we know that a lot of people want transportation. In terms of how the funding works, obviously the ministry does provide, as I mentioned, funding to transport students to and from home and school, including students that may have special needs. And I'm sorry that the next bullet's a little hard to read. How that base funding works is it starts with your prior year allocation, and then there's 4 components. There's the enrollment adjustment, so they look at last year, you get your base funding. Then they adjust for your enrollment based on your average daily enrollment. There is a cost update, and that adjustment for this year is 2%. And that's intended to provide support for school boards to manage increased costs in the current year, which we know is sort of challenging because inflation, it's not 2%. There's also a little bit of funding we get for a school bus rider safety training program so that we can provide some safety training to those on the bus. And then finally, we get a fuel escalation and a de-escalation funding adjustment. And so what this is the ministry actually recognizes fuel prices to be 91.8 cents a liter for Southern school boards. And if I knew where that was, I'd be filling up my gas tank. And this is referred to as the pegged price. On top of that, the ministry says, well, you know what? Transportation consortiums should be able to realize efficiencies because they're buying their fuel in bulk. So there's got to be some accountability for efficiency and you potentially discounted prices. So the ministry then adjusts that pegged price upward to 93.6 cents per liter, and that's referred to as the adjusted peg price. Then the GSN, the Grants for Student Needs, puts a corridor around that 93.6 cents of 3% above or below. If the fuel price bumps up against that 3% above or below, school boards don't get anything. If it goes above or below, like higher than that or lower than that, then the funding gets adjusted. So it's kind of a wonky formula. In terms of costs, administrative costs, they are shared by each board that participates in the consortium based on the student ridership, so a percentage of the student ridership. And October 31st is used as the enrollment date in which that ridership is determined. And again, that's all in the membership agreement. And then the actual operating costs, so the gas, the drivers, the school buses, route costs are apportioned again based on ridership for each member board. And if there's any additional services that are required because a specific school board is asking for it, then that school board is responsible for those costs. And in terms of the consortium itself, our school board, Greater Essex County District School Board, is the banker board. So we would process all of the invoices, the payments, the payroll, and then we invoice out to the other coterminous boards. And just to show you how wonky the funding formula is, our transportation for our board, based on our revised budget that we submitted to the ministry in December, is we get about $14.7 million in funding. And based on the services that we currently provide, it costs us $15.8 million. So we actually have a $1.1 to $1.2 million deficit. I think the ministry acknowledges in some respects that the funding formula is a little bit broken. So they've asked all of the consortium to complete what they call a route simulation. It's a common set of reference standards, common set of parameters. Every school board's got to use the same, or every consortium's got to use the same. In terms of student eligibility, the mode of transportation, the service parameters, the walk distance, all of those elements of it. And I think there's a potential that the funding formula could be changed for 23-24.
So next we'll talk about policy development, how policies come about for WES. Policy development has to be clear, concise, and enforceable policies are essential to an effective and efficient transportation consortium. WES has a common set of policies applicable to all member school boards of the consortium. The board of directors has oversight for all policies and amendments, and consistency in application of the policy is key. WES policies are comparable to the other 33 transportation consortia based on transportation eligibility, walk distances, provision of courtesy rides, hazardous situations, and use of GIS software to measure distances to determine transportation eligibility and walk distances to the bus stops. So just to paraphrase a little bit from the slide, a consortia is pretty much the standard across Ontario. There's 33 of them. We're not just one in Windsor. So, and there's reasons behind that as well. All of our policies can be found on our website, buskids.ca. They're under the policies section, pretty standard. And under the policies and procedures, you can see all of the policies that we have set forth. So we're going to go through a couple of important policies just so everyone has a clear understanding of why we make the decisions that we do. We'll talk about eligibility. Students may access an in-boundary school board designated school if their primary address is at a distance of more than 1 kilometer for JKSK, 1.6 kilometers for grade 1 through 8 inclusive, 3.2 kilometers for grade 9 through 12 inclusive. Use of specialized software to measure distances. Bus Planner is a software. It's also the same software that the parents sign up for, and they can see which schools are available for them with transportation available. Not Google Maps. Calculated using the roadwork and shortest walking path. These walk distances have been in effect since 2008. Prior to 2008, the distances were 1 kilometer for JKSK, 1.6 kilometers for grade 1 through 5, 2.0 kilometers for grade 6 through 8, and 3.2 for secondary. Responsibility of parents. So parents are responsible for their child's safety from the time they leave home up to the time they board the bus and from the time they get off the bus. They have to remind their children or the child about safety and behavior on the bus, assume responsibility for their child when they are dropped off at the designated stop, where that's applicable, inform the school and WES about any problems occurring on the bus which jeopardize the child's well-being and safety. Public transit program, policy GT 010, is used to serve the needs of high school students residing in the city of Windsor, must be registered to attend an identified program at a school other than the normal school of attendance and at a distance of more than 3.2 kilometers, and bus passes bus passes not used on a consistent basis will be canceled. Walk distance to bus stop. The following distances may need to be walked by students to reach their bus stop. For JK, SK to grade 8, it's 1 kilometer. For grade 9 to 12, it's 2.0 kilometers. Walk distances may be impacted by ability of the bus to safely access and turn around on the roads, and distance is calculated based on the shortest distance on a public road between the primary address and the bus stop. Courtesy rides, policy GT 013. This may be considered for those who do not meet the eligibility requirements, but it cannot result in additional buses, increased costs, or longer bus trips. It's conditional upon if there's a seat available on that bus, if the bus stop already exists, the route and length of the trip is not affected, and needs to be identified for the entire school year. Out-of-boundary students are ineligible for courtesy rides. Hazardous situations, policy GT 015. Pedestrian safety is municipal responsibility. West uses the following criteria to make a determination on the need for transportation. Volume of traffic, number of traveled lanes on a road, posted speed limits, sidewalks, physical barriers, which may come at a time of construction, if it's a large construction project, and grade level of the student as well. And the appeal process. So when would an appeal happen? An appeal would happen if a student was possibly denied transportation and it's available to parents or guardians who disagree with the manner in which the transportation policy has been applied. If a policy is not being followed for a transportation decision, then an appeal may apply. Simply not liking the policy doesn't warrant an appeal. So if somebody does complain about a policy or a situation, transportation situation, they would possibly put in an appeal. Their request to appeal the decision must be made in writing to the general manager of WES, and the appeal will be heard by the board of directors, and a final decision will be made by the directors. So if an appeal is made, it's not Umair Khan saying, no, you can't have this. It goes up for an appeal with the board meeting. We have a monthly board meeting with the board of directors for WES, and it's voted on to see if the policy has been fairly applied. It's not to change the policy, it's to see if the policy has been applied in a fair manner. Bus stop placements. What are the factors used to determine a bus stop location? A speed limit of the road and minimum distances from which drivers should be able to see a school bus that is stopped. Adequate shoulder or land width for student to wait to board the bus. And hazards such as one-way bridges, level crossings with no signals, bridges with no pathways. It is the parent's responsibility to get their child safely to and from the designated stop until they are safely on the bus. With that, we will come to questions.
Thank you. That was a great presentation. Lots of good information. I wonder if we can get that emailed to the trustees, because we don't have it. Could you do that? Okay, great. Thank you. Okay, and welcome to your new position too.
Thank you very much.
On behalf of the board. Trustee Leclerc has a question for clarification.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I'll predicate this on the fact that you are brand new in the position, or been about, what,
4 months.
not quite a year?
4 months.
Okay, 4 months. That's not quite a year.
Not quite a year.
So I'm predicating that on this, and the fact that I've been a trustee for 9 years, and it's quite common for trustees to get complaints about transportation. We all agree with that. And generally, those complaints only last the first few weeks of September. Something's happened post-pandemic that's resulted in what I see as an astronomical increase in complaints about transportation and West. And in fact, this week alone, I've had 4 complaints about West. The complaints just keep coming, and we're into March. And poor Miss Armstrong is well aware, because she gets every one of my emails that I get. So are you able to, in your 4 months of experience, able to relay what you think has changed? Because I actually was on the phone with somebody today on a complaint, and they're filing an appeal.
Sure.
And I'm trying to understand why the complaints just seem to continue on and on and on, whereas before they lasted just a few weeks.
Specifically for complaints, I can't answer that question without knowing the specific complaints. If it's policy related, I can safely say that there's been minimal policy changes in the last 4 months. Post-COVID, you know, we at our office we're fielding many of the same complaints when they call you. 100%. I'm not saying 100%, but a good percentage of them are calling the routers, yelling, screaming, saying, you know, similar things about what their complaints are. We can explain the policy to them. We can say, this is the policy, this is the reason behind the policy, and they may not like it. Whether they like the policy or not, I can't speak if that needs to be looked at or corrected, but there is a process behind it. That's what I can say, right? If there is a policy and it's brought up from a trustee to Shelley, and Shelley looks at it and says, okay, this policy may be not applicable or maybe needs to be changed, she would bring it up to the board and we would talk about it and see if it makes sense or if it doesn't make sense. It's not just, we just shut down complaints. We have many complaints, and we try to explain the policy to everyone. Not everyone is listening, but we do what we have to do to let them know the reasons behind the decisions on transportation.
Supplementary?
Yeah, supplemental. So without a doubt, when they're calling me, they've already been through you. So I'm definitely getting a lot fewer complaints than you are. I fully acknowledge that. So I just want to make it clear, it was in the presentation, that walking distance for secondary students is 3.2 kilometers. And that hasn't changed since 2008.
That has not changed.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Trustee McKinley.
Yeah, just wondering, you probably don't have the answer, perhaps Superintendent Armstrong does. Approximately how many appeals do we get in a year?
I would say we probably hear maybe 1, possibly 2 each board meeting. So it's not a lot. And just from my experience, it's not a quick, everybody just rushes through it. Sometimes there's quite a bit of debate on these items, but it's not a lot.
Supplementary?
Yeah. Are the appeals, would you say they are approximately equal to the percentage of students that each board has? Does one board have more maybe appeals because they have more riders? Or is there any kind of pattern, or have you ever noticed?
Through you, Madam Chair, sorry. I would say it's split generally equally between us and Windsor-Essex Catholic District School Board. We might have a little bit more than them based on the percentage of our ridership, but it's not like it's consistently the GEDSB. It's primarily those two boards.
Trustee Burgess and then trustee Sipcar after that.
Thanks, Madam Chair. I do have a few questions for clarification. We have an item on our agenda, L5, the school year calendar, and we have, with coterminous boards, similar PD days, when we choose to have our holidays, et cetera. I noticed there was something in the news about one board changing the school year to August and contemplating an October break, et cetera. And I'm wondering what the implications of our choosing our school calendar year has with transportation. Does it actually make sense for us to sometimes have a different calendar year as our coterminous boards, or is it transportation driven?
I can address some elements of that in my consultation with our coterminous boards. There's a significant transportation cost to a board running independently. I think my verification was approximately 78,000. As you see, we're running almost 30,000 students a day. So at a price of $1 each, each way, and it's a little bit more than that. That's a significant element for the one day. Over time, we've worked well with our coterminous boards to the point where for the last 2 years, COVID's a curveball. We have identical calendars with Windsor-Essex Catholic District School Board, and this year in particular, we've been working better with the French boards, Providence particularly. Traditionally, it was determined because of their dynamics, where they might have a school in Windsor and a school in Wyerton in the same board, that it didn't make sense for them to. They used to try to match each one, but then their own board had some schools here. But we've invited them in, and we have put a calendar together this year that is identical to Windsor-Essex Catholic and the most similar to Providence in 10 or 12 years I've been doing this. So there's other elements. The other thing we find is from our parents' perspective, having not only your elementary and secondary student be off on the same schedule, but having, in a sense, the city be off on the same schedule has proven to be beneficial where partners, City of Windsor, University of Windsor, day camps, these types of things are far more likely to run, knowing that we've got all of the students in the city off on a particular day for a PA day. So from that perspective, if that answers some of that, there's a transportation drives lots of the thinking.
So just to make sure supplemental, if I could, the childcare arrangements on days off when transportation isn't provided is also a discussion with some community partners that offer what to do with the kids on those days.
We have existing connections and contacts within our own board, so we're confident now that we're in agreement. We know, the following major partners will participate. We've talked in the past. Is there is it advantageous if it's September 21st or 28th? And we found or have determined that making that decision in the best interest of our curriculum, our coterminous board's curriculum, is that they'll respond as long as we give them ample notice. And if we can do it together, it makes more sense for them.
Thank you. Trustee Sipcar.
Thank you, through you, Madam Chair. Following Trustee McKinley's lines of questions, is there ever, or would you say that, and this is maybe more for Superintendent Armstrong, just because you've sat on the board for a few years now, is there more of a consistency in terms of topics or themes that get brought up with the appeals? Are they usually in the same categories that you would be able to share with us?
Thank you. Through you, Madam Chair, typically we find it's either the denial of a courtesy ride or it would be a hazard. There's no sidewalk or the cars are going too quickly on the road, and typically that's where the appeals generally come from. Do you agree?
Yes, no, definitely.
So on that note, then, like the rationale for appealing is because there's been a denial and there's some kind of safety issue. I guess, is there any consideration that goes towards like looking at a situation through an equitable lens, in the sense that, it's the length of the distance. There's nothing safety related, but it's that a parent can't afford to do X, or the bus pass is too expensive or something like that. Is there any sort of criteria upon, like, through which the board makes these decisions, or is it just like based on a personal narrative or some kind of, situation related to safety?
I think I can answer part of that question at least. So when we take a look at denials from an equitable lens, our job is to provide transportation in a fair and consistent manner. So a lot of times the question of equitable comes up, whereas we have to look at it from, if we're doing it for student X, then why are we not doing it for student Y? We don't have access to a lot of the same resources that, say, a school board would have. So when we do make a transportation decision, it's based on policy. That's where we would come from. Any deviation from policy may come in a request of an appeal or a request of the superintendent. But it has to be, if an appeal is being looked at, it has to be because the policy was not followed. Does that make sense? Does that answer your question? I'm sorry.
Yeah, it does. And I like what you're essentially saying, you default to the policy in the absence of all other information because you're not a school board and knowing the situation. And so I guess my question would be, it doesn't sound like there's any sort of like criteria established to deviate either, if there was an equity consideration. And I guess my question would be, if, let's say our board determines that we would like to see some equity criteria in terms of those considerations, understanding that we're not the governance authority, but it's the board of directors, would it be through Superintendent Armstrong for us to make those policy suggestions in order to meet our needs for our students? Because I think one of our major concerns is that when there are issues, those things aren't being considered, and a way to influence that process, I think, is a concern for some of the trustees, or a lot of the trustees.
Thank you, through Madam Chair. I don't know that we would be able to say that issues are necessarily just Greater Essex issues, right? I think when it comes to, I think what you're referring to, it could be something broader than just beyond our board. And if our board made a certain decision contrary to the policies, then again, there's a financial cost to the board for making those decisions. But if it has an adverse effect on other school boards, we equally have to bear the cost of that. Sometimes it's hard. This is not going to come out right, but sometimes it's just hard to draw the line. And where do you say something requires the breach where another situation doesn't? Like, where does the consistency part come from? And I think that creates additional challenges. All of the policies of the Transportation Consortium have been reviewed by a human rights lawyer, legal counsel. So we're in the process of making some updates to those policies, but we've all had them reviewed from that equity lens.
Thank you very much. There are no further, sorry, Trustee Burgess, second time.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I could go on the West site and I could look for the policy, but I just wanted to make sure that I have it public. Do we have a maximum time on a bus per day for our students in our policy? Like, for example, a maximum 1 hour or 1 hour and 10 minutes or something. I know a few years ago we had a specific concern with some students who were at a magnet program at Western, for example, long days. I just want to know, do we have a maximum in policy now? Because at that time we didn't.
So yes, I can speak to that as well. When we're talking about regular schooling, in boundary busing, there is a time limit on there. I believe it's close to the hour mark. but we also provide out-of-boundary busing for the programs, right? Like for IB or for ESL or whatever the list of programs there is, and that may run longer because of the distance to go to a different school. Say a student from Essex is going to a program at Herman, there would be some additional time required on the bus, which is just normal transportation.
There's construction delays or things like that too.
Yes, and like we wouldn't account for any construction delays or traffic or anything like that. It would be based on software.
Thank you. Second question from Trustee Leclerc.
Thank you. So you indicated that courtesy rides are based on the number of spaces, so that they cap out when the buses are full, right? No more courtesy rides can be given. So would it be fair to say, from a theoretical perspective, the fact that Providence and Viamonde have fewer riders than Greater Essex County District School Board does, that there's fewer courtesy rides available to our board than there is to those other two boards?
I wouldn't say it's a percentage-wise, so we wouldn't say there's this much percentage available because we have 50% of the students that go to public board for courtesy rides. That's not something we take into consideration, really. It's not something that, not that we wouldn't take into consideration, but that's not the factors that we're looking at when we're looking at out-of-boundary or courtesy ride. We're looking at several different things. It's not just one thing. So it would be age of the student, distance to the school, and a couple other items I don't know off the top of my head, but they are listed over there.
You don't put more than one
Supplemental?
So supplemental would be that the fact that there's fewer students at Viamonde and Providence likely means that buses have fewer occupied seats. So there's more opportunity for courtesy rides for Viamonde and Providence than there are for Greater Essex County District School Board. It has, so you're running large buses for all those, for Viamonde and Providence, correct?
Correct.
And they're not full. Most of those buses are not full. So it goes without saying that those boards seem to have more opportunity for courtesy rides than we do.
We'd have to take a look at efficiency as well. Every year we take a look at efficiency on the school buses as well. It's not, hey, we have 5 school buses assigned for Providence and that's how it's going to be. If we can reduce the number of students on a bus, we try to fill them to maximum capacity at the start of the year as much as possible.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
For the second time, Trustee McKinley?
Yeah, around courtesy rides, I seem to remember back before our big efficiency audit that we had quite a purge of our courtesy rides because it was a painful start to the school year as we cleaned out a lot of the courtesy rides. So we used to get a report that gave us the numbers that we had in courtesy riders before. I'm not sure if you guys have had that report for the last several years, but
I think, sorry, I think that report, if memory serves me, but maybe Trustee Burgess remembers, I think was prior to kind of the legalization of the consortium.
okay, so it's been that long since we've
Yes.
had it?
Yes.
Yeah, I guess it didn't seem that long in my mind.
Yeah, time flies.
I just was like surprised that we still had like courtesy rides because I thought we were like out of the courtesy ride business there for a while. So, okay, thanks.
Thank you very much for answering all those questions and for coming tonight. And again, if you could email us the presentation, I think that would be very helpful. Yeah.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you very much. Okay. We have no delegations for tonight's meeting. We do have one person on the speakers list, Jay Palco. Jay. Welcome to our school board. And you're speaking on agenda items L1 and L6.
Yes.
5 minutes. Thank you very much.
All right. All right. Good evening, Madam Chair, trustees, and all joining us here and watching remotely. My name is Jeremy Pelko. I'm a father of 2, an uncle to 4. Many know me as Jay or Mr. J. To the kids I teach in Sunday school, they have other funny names for me if I give them the opportunity. Kids can be rather creative. I've also coached, trained, run for MP and MPP, served on a church board for many years, and volunteered in various capacities. I graduated from the University of Windsor with my bachelor's and master's degrees in mechanical engineering. My career has been as a design and development engineer for over 20 years, primarily in automotive with a few years in marine, and includes management experience. The message I have to share with you today is one of authority, appointment, and accountability. Based on what I've learned and been thoroughly convinced of both personally and professionally, children at all stages of their little lives are at the top of the list for what is most precious in Canada. More precious than freedom, rights, politics, and curriculum are our children. Who among us would not sacrifice freedom, power, or profit to spare a child pain and suffering? Sadly, there are some who would do exactly that. Instead, they would choose to sacrifice the best interests of children, or do worse, in order to save their own skin and or realize personal gain. Parents are the primary caregivers for children, and the ones assigned the labor of love to guard against such people and circumstances, and to lead their nurturing and growth. This does not change because a child crosses the threshold of a school or any institution. Never will a ministry, a board, or a school have the rightful first and foremost authority over the well-being of a child. That is the role of parents. Childlike innocence is of utmost importance to parents because it is not recoverable once it's lost. When the mind of a person is exposed to a certain stimuli, it cannot be unseen or unheard, and enough corrupting stimuli will eventually corrupt the person who is ill-equipped to process the material, especially the vulnerable, like children. Teaching children to be casual about their sexuality, to fear police, to cause them to question or confuse their personal reality, to go against the faith-based teaching they receive at home and place of worship, is not the mandate of a good school system. Educate, don't indoctrinate. People demand that their government stay out of their bedrooms, and rightfully so. But then somehow some allow, even promote, the government to enter the bedrooms of children, little ones who need protection and nurturing, not a head full of hedonistic propaganda. Our request to you is to pledge with deepest devotion and commitment to guard against the corruption of our children and ensure their innocence is kept intact until they signal to their parents they are ready for whatever life may be offering them or may be challenging them with at any given time. And then it is the parents who give and or lead facilitating delivery of that most likely very sensitive information. Kids, youth are our future. They need adults to help them, not harm them mentally, physically, emotionally, or spiritually. Those in leadership positions, whether elected, appointed, or hired, bear greater responsibility and consequences, good or bad, for the decisions they make or don't make and actions they take or don't take. At the top of the list are those responsible for children. Please choose wisely how you will lead. We love our children and hope and pray this type of selfless and sacrificial love is expressed by this board and all educators, because it takes a village, and if we fail our kids, then we all fail with them. Let's truly keep the best interests of our children in mind and help them hold their precious innocence intact until their parents, dad and mom, decide what and when is age appropriate. Schools need to focus on reading, writing, and arithmetic with as much wholesome fun as possible along the way, because kids learn best when they can play and have fun. We say this not to defend the rightful first and foremost position of parents. That is fact and requires no defense. But to ensure you are all fully aware and reminded that to go against the parents is to go against the children. A wise leader has many good advisors. Who is or are our best advisors for education? Doug Ford, Stephen Leche, Ministry of Education, school boards, teachers, counselors, political agenda, special interest groups? No, not ever. By far, the best and final say advisors for the education, health, safety, growth, and overall well-being of children is and will always be the parents. God bless the children and parents, and God bless us all. May He guide you in the good work He has appointed you to do, to be a blessing to our most precious children. In Jesus' name, amen.
Thank you, Mr. Palco. Thank you.
Okay.
Trustee Chin, you have a question of the speaker for clarification?
Yes. Thank you for your information. I have a question regarding the sensitive information and propaganda. I don't quite understand what you mean. So could you please give more, explanation for that?
Sure. I mean, I've been here for a few of the meetings, and a few of them have revolved around some hot topics regarding books. What's being taught in our schools and the sexualization of children in schools. I just don't believe that's appropriate whatsoever. Those are sensitive topics and not appropriate for schools to be teaching our kids. I mean, I understand there's some basic information that sometimes is shared, but when it comes to some of the specifics that have been shared in some of these books, the acts included in the books, and some of these authors and what their actual objectives are, it's way out of line, and it needs to be cut off and stopped because it's corrupting our children. So that's what I'm getting at. And I understand that as a board, you have management, we'll say, superiors to report to. But there is a time when sometimes we're being led down to, but we need to lead up to them and tell them they're out of line because they're hurting kids.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Didn't know that was possible. Okay.
Thank you. Thank you for explanation. And to my understanding, inclusiveness is that we respect all the groups, every groups of people, and we respect their, background, ethnics, and fully respect it. But do you think it is respectful? Is truly inclusiveness if we just favor one group and then do something which make other groups feel bad?
Chin?
Yeah,
Trustee Chin?
yeah.
Your question is...
Yeah, my question is that
Your
because-
question is out of order. You can only ask the speaker for clarification on what's been said, and you're asking the speaker for an opinion, and that is not allowed
Okay,
under this,
okay, yeah,
under our bylaws.
Okay,
So,
I changed my question. Okay, yeah.
no, we're going to move on. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank
Yes,
you.
I think it should include all groups, by the way. And I think if you're going to be inclusive to all, and don't selectively exclude some.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Moving on to new business, I'm looking for a motion to approve L1 to L4. Trustee Cook, Trustee Leclerc, L1 to L4. Are there any questions? L1 to L4. Trustee Burgess.
Thanks, Madam Chair. L1, we received, well, it was a broad broadcast from the Ontario Human Rights Commission, and that is included in L1. We received this information, which is public information dated February 16th, 2023. Will that be included with our minutes? Statement of code obligations of education officials.
It's been circulated to the trustees as information.
For information only. Thank you.
You're welcome. Trustee Sipkar?
Yes, through you, Madam Chair. I wasn't going to be supporting L4, so I don't know if that changes if you're removing it, but I did have some comments that I wanted to make about it. I'm not sure if I can just make them and then they're noted. I'm fine with that.
We can separate L4.
Sure.
So first I'll call the vote on L1 to L3. All those in support? Any opposed? Those are carried. Item L4, Trustee Sipkar?
Yes, Madam Chair. I don't know if it needs to be moved. I'm not going to move it, but I can give comments on it.
Sorry, someone to move L4, Trustee Cook, Trustee Leclerc.
Thank you. Through you, Madam Chair. Yeah, I was surprised to see this in our package and being so short. I think I appreciate that the context has changed from when this motion was first passed 4 years ago. And I understand the rationale, but I still feel, 4 years later, that I do believe our core students are being underserved in this way through our IB program. I also feel that we haven't done a system-wide kind of analysis of the needs, and given that the report states that the current needs of our system are being met, but doesn't demonstrate what those needs are, nor what those budgetary constraints are, it's hard for me to support this recommendation. While I do believe that potentially that could be the case, I just felt that a one-page report not outlining the needs of our system nor the budgetary constraints, and just where we're at it in terms of the COVID, I don't want to say past the COVID pandemic, but the budgetary impact of COVID. I just felt that it wasn't enough information for me to support this motion at the time. Furthermore, as I mentioned in my comments, I do believe our core schools are being underserved. I believe that there isn't as much choice, and that the reason for this motion was to bring more programming to our core. I still think that that is the underlying goal of this motion, and maybe it wasn't right for IB, but I don't feel like that was really demonstrated through this report. So I won't be supporting it, even though I do appreciate the context has changed. So thank you.
Do you have a specific question, Trustee Sipkar?
No, I just saying my comments.
Trustee Burgess?
On L4, since it's separate, in the original motion that came forward prior to the pandemic, March 19th, 2019, I know there was a pretty robust discussion on what core was. Did we ever arrive at what core was? We assumed it was Windsor. It wasn't anywhere else but Windsor. But did we ever determine what the core was?
According to the director, we have not.
No, people have differing views on what the core is, and that was a concern as well.
Well, I have a question.
Your question?
Yes. What happens next? There's this is a report. The aim of this memo is to report back to us and to not pursue the expansion. Does it get revisited at any time? Does it die on the vine? Is it a cyclical review?
Through you, Madam Chair, you want to say something first?
Well,
You
I
go.
was just going to say that the motion reads "at this time," so it's open to future consideration. But
Yeah, I don't see this as being, a final decision. This is something that could be revisited, but at this present time, there's not, for example, we're not seeing a need for more programming as we see what's happening in schools. Now, COVID, of course, has had some effect on that. Let's be honest, yeah.
and if memory serves me, in the past, we actually had schools asking us if they could take on the IB program.
As you might recall, through Madam Chair, we put out an expression of interest, and a few schools decided they wanted, because you need staff commitment for that. It's a big process to operate an IB program. It's a very big expense as well. And you have to have a commitment of your whole staff. It's where it's worked successfully, you can really see the difference when a staff is committed.
Trustee Sipkar, you do have a question?
I just wanted to answer Trustee Burgess's comment. The reason why it so clearly says as defined by the Walkerville or Kennedy family of school is because that was the debate, that what a core school was. So that's, to answer your question, I defined it in the motion.
Are there any other questions? And I'll call for the vote. All those in support? Opposed? That's carried. Thank you very much. School year calendar. Someone move that. Trustee Leclerc, Trustee Burgess. Do we have any questions on the school year calendar? Trustee Burgess?
Well, I alluded to it earlier, and I was thank you very much, through you, Madam Chair, to get the answer about how, what an influence transportation is, and it's a budgeting thing, and looking at the deficits that we already have in transportation, so it does drive a lot of it. But I'm interested to note, like I said, I can't remember what board it was. Is it Limestone? Kingston? I think it's Kingston, or maybe, yeah. Anyway, one of the provincial boards is looking at changing their school year to have a break in October, November. Have we ever considered that? Has that ever come forward to us? I mean, I don't know where, I know we've looked at year-long and programming in the summer, and other boards have, et cetera, to accommodate really student achievement that is lost over the summer. And there are reasons, there are real, achievement reasons to change a school year calendar. But I'm just wondering, do we ever think out of the side, outside and kind of scrap it and rebuild it?
So I know from memory that it has occasionally been discussed, not in recent years, and I think the recent years have been hit hard by the reality of the financial implications, because we're in a deficit with our transportation, and any deviation from the other boards with regard to the school calendar would cost us big bucks. That's the best answer I could give. Trustee Sipcar, you have a question?
Yeah, through you, Madam Chair. So if I understood Superintendent Hillman's response earlier for the other question, I'm asking, how aligned are we with the other boards? I wasn't able to read this, but from your answer, I gathered that we're not as aligned with certain boards.
Through you, Madam
Okay,
Chair.
sorry.
So we're aligned with the boards in our transportation consortium. So Lambton Kent, for example, although I would consider coterminous in some elements, is not a board we plan with. They do that with St. Clair Catholic, London Catholic, etc.
So just as a supplemental,
Supplementary,
so can I understand the rationale for the 1 day back before, is it Labor Day weekend? Am I reading that correctly? I'm reading that correctly, right? So we're back on Friday, the 1st, September 1st, which is...
No.
That's
So
it, but there's no P there. Doesn't say that.
it can't be a P. For clarity to communities, when we produce, so this is the ministry template, which starts on September 1st and ends on the normally the last day of July. So school begins on Tuesday the 5th. In our there's technical definitions to board designated holidays and PA days. So we just don't start school till the 5th. It's technically not a board designated holiday because that implies some staff are working, some staff. When we send versions out for families, we'll be clear first day of school is September 5th.
Okay, that helps, because I look at this all the time for my own daughter, but there are Ps on other days, like the professional activity days already assigned. Is there a reason why we didn't assign that on the 1st? Because I was just like, oh no, we're gonna have to be back before, I'm gonna hear this from parents, like.
So we are permitted 7 Ps, and those are regulated both by provincial legislation and our contracts. So I can't just put a P, that would make 8. And our teaching staff do not work. So by putting a P implies it's a work day, and then you would be at school. For clarification, point noted. And I live in this template all the time, so I read it differently. We will be certain as we turn this into parent-friendly documentation. Our partners in our unions, et cetera, who we plan with are aware, but we will articulate September 5th as the first day of school for staff and students. And that's a nice return to a somewhat regular model for the first time in 3 or 4 years.
Thank you. You ready to vote? All those in support of the school year calendar? Any opposed? That's carried. Thank you very much. Moving on to L6, this is a notice of motion from Trustee Burgess. Would you like to move it?
Well, Madam Chair, I have been given some notice that there's possibility of a notice of motion that might render this motion moot. I don't want to remove it. I don't really want to rescind it, but I can withdraw for now. And with the proviso that when the notice of motion comes, if and when comes up, something else comes on the agenda, and I feel that this is, redundant or whatever, I can just then rescind it. So right
appreciate
now,
that.
I guess a motion to reconsider the adoption of the agenda and just strike this right now, or withdraw it? What would you like me to, how would we do this? By
Can we just-
consensus,
can we just
can
do
we
it?
just agree to like ignore it for tonight?
Sure. Okay. Could you just formally ask us to withdraw it?
Yeah, I
at
will
this-
ask, since
at
it's not
this
been
time?
moved and it's not been seconded, it's, we own the agenda, but we don't own the motion. So I would ask for consensus if I could withdraw this.
Okay. Any objections? No, thank you very
Thanks.
much.
Cheers.
Moving on to M1, the report of the Director of Education.
Just waiting for Mr. Scantlebury there. There we go. Okay, it's been a while since I've been able to present the board with a typical, I think, review of what's happening throughout the district. We are fortunate that this February there have been a great many events and occasions to look back on. There's been a lot of appropriate weather in recent weeks, but that hasn't, inappropriate weather, I guess, that hasn't stopped schools, just such as Jack Minor in Kingsville, from enjoying Carnival celebrations. Not having snow didn't inhibit their festivities. And at DM Eagle, families joined students at the school for their mathalon. It added up to a great evening of fun by the fractions. They took part in the DPA challenge at James L. Dunn Public School by showing off their muscle endurance that they've built up this year. The objective was to see how long they could do the wall, sit on the wall, which isn't nearly as easy as it may look or seem. The daily physical activity at A.V. Graham recently was a little more aerobic in nature with a glow stick dance party. Active minds are also still getting a lot of exercise. Principal Garth Brown at Prince Edward Public School had the honor of presenting this young learner with his Lexia Achievement Certificate. And I know everyone that came out to our recent event at the new school in Kingsville had a good time. We were joined by students from Jack Minor, Kingsville District High School and Public School and Harrow Public School, all to sign the final beam before it was lifted into place on the construction site. It was a great milestone marker, and the building is on schedule to open for September 2024. Students from Sandwich Secondary School recently had their photography work on display at Leamington Arts Centre. The center has been a great supporter of student art. And in late March, they'll be celebrating their 25th juried show of student artwork. The Windsor Symphony Orchestra was also given students great opportunities to connect with music, and recently more than 1,000 of them crowded into the Capitol Theatre for the Windsor Symphony Orchestra Education Concert. Today, we officially kicked off our annual kindergarten registration period, and for the first time since 2020, we'll be holding in-person open houses for children and families to visit their public school, meet the staff, and to get a good look at everything that we offer our youngest learners. It's this Thursday, the 23rd, starting at 5 p.m. And what's more fun than kindergarten? These youngsters at Roseland Public School created and shared kindness messages with their older schoolmates, posting them all around the school. Glenwood Public School has received its IB World Certification this month. They had a little celebration to mark the occasion. Glenwood is the first school in the city of Windsor to provide the IB Primary Years program, and they join MD Benny in Leamington as an official PYP school. Last week, we celebrated random acts of kindness, and at Begley Public School, they were on the receiving end. RBC Securities and Canadian Tire Jumpstart program teamed up to provide students at the school with sports equipment, and they had a ball. Here's something for our calendars. North Star High School in Amherstburg will be hosting a spring craft show on April 15th. It's so nice to have something connected to warm weather to look forward to. And the Kennedy Prep basketball program is having a good year. They have a 13-5 win-loss record this year in the Ontario Scholastic Basketball Program, but more importantly, it's an opportunity for student athletes to play at a high level while receiving mentorship to succeed academically and beyond high school. And this is Black History Month. Schools across the board have been participating in activities and learning about the contributions of influential Black history makers. And as noted earlier, one of the highlights for us as a board has been the Black Excellence Speaker Series for secondary school students, with guests Amina Abdul, Superintendent Josh Canty, Chantel Morgan-Brown, and Dr. Andrew Allen. And those are just some of the activities happening around the Greater Essex County District School Board in February. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Do we have any questions on the report from trustees? Lots of good things, as usual, going on in our school board. Thank you. Next is the report of our OPSPA director, Trustee Burgess.
Thanks, Madam Chair. It's been a while since I gave a report that had a lot of information in it. I would like to share this, and I'll pass it on to Madame Leboeuf for notes. But in January, Trustee Nelson, Ching, Buckler, Sipcar, and Burgess attended the Public Education Symposium that was held in late January in Toronto. This was the first in-person PES that we've enjoyed since January 2020, just prior to the pandemic being announced. So it was wonderful to connect with colleagues in the various plenary sessions that we had and workshops, as well as meet newly elected trustees, which constitutes about 50% of all school districts in the province. About half of us are new. PES presentations are now online for those who attended to review, or for those who didn't attend and want to take advantage of seeing them for the first time, some of them. So to view them, I will be sending this, and you can just click on it and you can see those presentations and the question and answer things and stuff. A reminder that hard copies of the Good Governance Guide have been distributed and to all trustees and directors of education, school boards and authorities, and for anybody who wasn't able to attend. It's also available in electronic form. I want to mention that the OPSPA award nominations are open. We've probably received some notification of that, but you know, the deadline is April 3rd, and before we know it, it's going to be here. So please, I'm sure here in Greater Essex, we know many outstanding students, teachers, education workers, community volunteers, retired or active trustees, or education leaders in our area that would be worthy recipients of these awards. And they have different criteria. Please look at them and contact me with some suggested nominations so we can work on that submission together, okay? Because it has to come from a board rather than an individual. So as far as our stuff, you know, anybody can nominate. So I will send that along. OPS was also in the process of finalizing a submission to the Honorable Karina Gould, the Minister of Families, Children and Social Development, and Honorable Marie-Claude Bibeau, the Minister of Agriculture and Agri-Food, to support the National School Food Policy. This is something that the federal government has committed to. We often talk about provincial things, but OPSPA actually obviously works with federal as well, the Council of Ministers of Education, etc. I've had the pleasure of serving also as a member of the OPSPA Policy Development Work Group. We met last week, representing Western Region, and locally on the Windsor-Essex Student Nutrition Network and the Windsor-Essex Food Policy Council. I serve on both of those. In addition to the policy development. So it's a matter that's very close to my heart and work for a good few years now. So I feel now that it has national prominence as a commitment from the federal government. We may see more than the 12 cents per student provincial funding for daily student nutrition programs in Ontario, because it's a federal initiative. So I would appreciate any help and aid that you can give me in those in any of those areas, because the advocacy is great. So we discussed the draft submission at last week's OPSPA Policy Development Work Group. It was a joint with education program, and I'll be sure to share that work with these organizations locally too, so they can collectively advocate from OPSPA's work and strengthen our mutual advocacy for that federal program. I also want to highlight, it was sent to us, I think it's a great initiative, because we've been through an extraordinary time. We are, on the tail end here. I'd like to highlight Lost and Found, a new national storytelling project supported and endorsed by OPSPA, but it's led by the Canadian Children's Literacy Foundation and funded by the Government of Canada in collaboration with a diverse coalition of mental health and child-serving organizations. A lot of kids journal, but Canadian kids need a platform to tell their COVID-19 pandemic stories. For children and their families, the pandemic has been a struggle. Lockdown measures and their knock-on effects have affected children's mental and physical health, educational attainment, and connections to community. And storytelling is necessary for developing literacy skills. Storytelling is also a way to build connections between people, teach the value of listening, and to remind ourselves that everyone's story matters. So the project, this Lost and Found project, helps children connect with their own emotions and experiences, which will allow them to better understand and engage with their communities. Stories will be archived for future generations to understand what the COVID-19 pandemic was like for Canada's kids and their families. So once you register, the educators and other participants can download a 35-page toolkit. It's a great resource for teachers with students up to age 12 who want to work on storytelling skills with their kids, and I've included the link. So I hope our board and our staff take advantage of this federal initiative. Just to note, some upcoming events. The Education, Labor Relations, and Human Resources Symposium 2023 is being held April 27th to 28th in Toronto, and interested trustees and supervisory officers and HR leaders are encouraged to attend. And I'd like to ask a question of the director on what her role will be at that particular
Apparently, I'm on a panel for that. I just found out that today, so you're looking forward to that.
Right. And, we haven't signed all our contracts. It's a very, it's still a very active file, right? It's really good to know and understand this while you have your term as a trustee. So it's going to be nice. It's the first one that we're back in person. So another chance to meet with colleagues, particularly with human resources focus. Save the date for the OPSPA AGM, June 8th to 10th at Blue Mountain, Collingwood. CSBA is the Canadian School Board Association, where we meet with trustee colleagues in the Indigenous trustee gathering. Indigenous trustees from obviously all over Turtle Island, actually. Meet in Banff, July 3rd to 5th. You can imagine how popular that's going to be. So I've already gone online, and it says that some places are already gone, even though the registration's not open. So I don't understand it, but the accommodations will be the key thing, right? And shuttling to there. It's at the Banff Center for Arts. It's a fabulous venue, and the connections that are made in the Canadian School Board Association thing are very, very rich. It's a great place to network. Anyway, the details are available on the CSBA site and its links, and I've included that, and that ends my report.
Thank you very much. Question, Trustee Chin?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for your report. You mentioned the Good Governance Guide has been provided to us. That's very good. And I want to ask, what's the relationship with the Good Governance Guide with the policy of our board? And if how much our board should refer to or follow the Good Governance Guide when we, do our how to say that, when we uphold the quality of our education. So because I didn't see that mentioned in our policy. Thank you.
Well, I think it's well named. It's a governance guide, Good Governance Guide. And it's based on not only the Education Act, but ethics and good policy and good governance. So it's developed. The governance guide itself is developed by the OESC, which is the Ontario Education Services Corporation. Do I have that right? Okay. Which is not only OPSPA, but the Catholic counterparts, etc., and professionals and a lot of legal support, and it's a really richly developed guide. So every board can develop their own policies following that guidance. It's the Education Act is the only thing that we must abide by, right? It's the law. But policies can obviously suit each board. But it's an opinion you're asking for me for, so I'll give my opinion. I think it's a very good guide. And I think new trustees, veteran trustees, no matter because it's been revised and updated particularly, I think it's good to review. I think it's good to look through the lens of that governance guide at all the work we do as policymakers.
Just add, I think it's an exemplar of way boards should be organized, managed. I think it provides a great resource in a number of ways. It's certainly looked at by a number of people in terms of the final development of that document. I do think it's an excellent document.
And we are a member of OPSPA that helps to provide that for all the member boards. Trustee Chin, a supplementary?
Yeah, supplementary. And this guide, I know is kind of a resource to refer if anybody or if we found anything wrong with our with our performance, and is there any legal result or penalty according to the good governance guide?
The good governance, if I could. Yeah, I was going to say the Good Governance Guide is not a legal document. It's a resource and a guideline. It has many things that we should be looking at. It's right, but I'm not sure that is something that you would be using for a kind of a legal action. Is that what you were going to say?
Yeah, I was going to say that the guide, like all the way throughout, makes reference back to the Education Act and the section of the Education Act that applies to whatever they're giving guidance on. So the whole guide falls in line with the Education Act.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. The next item on the agenda is the report of the striking committee. And I just wanted to clarify, you have the report, but I just wanted to clarify that and I did send an email to remind the trustees of this, but there are other members of this committee that are named in the motion. So in the motion, we have 2 trustees, the Dismantling Anti-Black Racism Committee, 2 student members, and then other community members, including GEDDSB committee members. So what the striking committee did, because the motion doesn't give any guidance on who's supposed to put this committee together, so the striking committee identified the 4 other committees of the board that should have representation on the committee, so that administration can help put the committee together. And then the motion also provides that the committee, once they get together, can decide that there might be some area that needs other representation. That's up to the committee. And they can also invite resources into the committee as well. So, so now we've provided that guide. We've named the 2 trustees and an alternate, and we've provided the guidance to administration so that they can now proceed with that in accordance with our motion. Are there any questions on the striking committee report? Okay, thank you. Then I'll move to the next item, which is the chair's report. That would be me. And there's going to be a little bit of repetition from the director's report, but nevertheless, I'm going to remind everybody that our kindergarten registration is going on February 21st to March the 3rd, and open houses are taking place at all our schools on Thursday, February 23rd from 5 p.m. to 7 p.m. Registration for kindergarten is available online through the board's website, and we are very proud of the wide range of services and programs that we provide for all students to succeed in our schools. Then I was going to highlight particular celebrations, and of course, the major one for February would be Black History Month, which is I've already mentioned at the beginning of the meeting, and we continue to celebrate that throughout the month. I also had written down the Raising the Roof ceremony in Kingsville that the director mentioned, but what a great show of love and support on Valentine's Day. That those who were able to attend got to add their signature to that final steel beam that is going to be mounted in the internal structure for our new K-12 school. I just thought that was awesome. And then continuing with our celebrations, we do have a celebration of construction planned. It was going to be Thursday, but they're predicting bad weather. So I wanted everyone to know that the date has been changed to Friday, March 3rd at 10:30 a.m. And this is a celebration for the construction of our new school being built in the town of Tecumseh. Yes, on Old Tecumseh Road. So that's very exciting. And then the other celebration I wanted to mention is the public open house that's scheduled for the new North Star High School in Amherstburg. And that's the evening of Wednesday, March 1st. And the public is welcome to attend and tour this new school. New schools are always exciting for our board. And the last bit of my report is I just wanted to highlight that attached to your board package is the letter from trustees that went to the Minister of Education, Stephen Lecce, regarding the Ontario-wide struggle to fill positions with professional trained support staff. And so you have a copy of that letter, but we also, in that letter, went into some detail regarding our local challenges. So I was happy that we were able to send that on to the minister. And I know from the telephone calls that we have with the minister and the chairs of the board, I mean, it just keeps coming up over and over again. It's a concern across the province, but we wanted him to be aware of our specific local challenges, and I think we did that in the letter. And the other thing that was distributed to you tonight that I asked to go into your files, you should have, there should be this statement from the Ontario Human Rights Commission about some of the challenges that school board trustees are facing, and I think it's an important bulletin, and I would ask that if you haven't had a chance yet, that you read that when you get a chance. And that ends my report. Are there any questions? No? Good, thank you. So now, speaking of questions, we're at trustee question period. Do we have questions for this meeting? Trustee Chin. Trustee
Thank you, Madam Chair. The question is from the parents also, and I ask the question with fully respect, and it's just want to make our board have high quality of education. So the question is that regarding those books, and parents would like to know from Superintendent of Education Program and Professional Learning what the status of those titles are from your review. And those books' names are What Are Your Words? How Mamas Love Their Babies, Push, Looking for Alaska, Fun Home. This book is gay. So these are the books that parents would like to know from Superintendent of Education Program, what the status of those titles are from your review. Thank you.
Thank you for the question, but I don't think that it's reasonable that the superintendent can answer that off the top of her head. So if you could send her the question, and then Superintendent Howard can give you the response.
Yes,
Okay?
and I can send, but this has been mentioned several times. I think
Yes.
it's our duty to have a response.
I understand that, but unless you would have given her those titles before the meeting, there's no way that she can answer that tonight. So
That how like how mamas love their babies. It has been mentioned several times.
yes, I
Yeah,
understand
so,
that, but
yeah.
you gave a long list of books there. So
Whatever she remembers, she can give the answer. Cause I think it's serious.
okay, we're not
Yeah.
going to debate that.
Okay.
So I'm asking you if you could send that list to the superintendent with the books that you just listed, and then we can get that report back.
Can I ask another question, supplemental? Yeah.
Is it related to this?
Yes, yes. I think if I don't ask this question, will these books be, be checked, examined, because we have a lot of concerns? And if I don't ask again and again, will that be resolved, the issue? Is there any,
So, Trustee Chin, so
okay.
we need to get that list so that Superintendent Howitt can respond.
I think she already got the list before.
And then we go from there, okay? That's what we have, that's the process. You need to provide the list to Superintendent Howitt, and then she can respond.
Okay, thank you.
Yep, thank you for the question. Do we have other questions from trustees? Trustee Burgess?
Thanks, Madam Chair. I've had quite a few phone calls actually, but there was a presenter in our December meeting that brought something to my notice, and I just wanted to make sure, are we making sure that everybody who comes as a presenter or on our present speakers list who comes to speak knows that they will be live streamed and that the live stream is kept on our YouTube channel for some time? It was brought to my attention because there was some personal and intimate knowledge that a person was willing to share publicly, thinking that it would be at a board meeting as business of the board, but didn't realize that, their entire church community or their entire social community was going to be able to see this, and it would be there for everybody. And so I understand there's signage, but I'm wondering if there's something right on the speakers list that says this is consent to being live streamed.
So I know that it's on our website homepage, but I don't know specifically beyond that. And I know that, the requests come through the director's office and there's dialogue, but we could make a note to check that.
Yeah, so supplemental, I would say that it's a gap because it's not, it has to be kind of on where you sign.
We don't know yet that it's not happening,
Right.
so.
Okay.
Okay,
Thank
you. Do we have any other questions under trustee question period? For the first time, anyone else? Okay, Trustee Chin, you have a different question?
Yes. Yes. Thank you, Madam Chair. My question
Point
is.
of order. You only get one question per member by bylaw.
I'm being told that that's true. That's our bylaw.
Thank
Sorry,
you.
but you can always send a question to administration by email. You can send them a question or call.
Cause the question is from parents, it's not from me. So I would like to request a public response next meeting regarding the question. So that's fair, right?
You can ask the question at the next meeting, yes.
No, I already asked. I'm looking forward a response, public response in the next meeting. Thank you.
Anyone else? Okay, notice is a motion. Anyone for this meeting? Trustee Cook?
Thank you. So my notice of motion is striking committee be tasked with establishing a bylaw committee to commence a 5-year review as required.
Thank you. Do we have any other notices of motion? Trustee Chin?
Thank you, Madam Chair. The notice of motion is that based on the request of Christian community of GEDSB, and the Christian community request to fly the Christian flag over Easter, April 6th to the 14th this year and every other year after that, as a recognition of one of Christianity's most holiest holidays. Do I need to repeat?
You could send that to Ms. LeBoeuf. You send
Okay,
your
yeah,
notice of
I can
motion?
send.
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
And I know that we have policies and protocols in place for requesting the flag. So you
Oh,
send that
okay.
to.
Okay, thank
Yep,
you.
Okay, any other notices of motion? It's a notice of motion. Okay, do we have any announcements for this meeting? Trustee Burgess and Trustee Leclerc.
I have a couple, but I will just say that on February 15th, the Migration Community Hall Kingsville held its annual general meeting and a regular meeting. I've been assigned by the striking committee and the board to serve on that, and just to say that it was a successful AGM and that we've had some successful fundraising since we've been back open since October 1st to the general public, and that we look forward to, and actually the hall is in community use much more than, it was for a long time, so it's nice to see all those sports and community activities back. But Migration Hall 2 is looking forward to a production of the musical 9 to 5, coming with a great staff, great cast rather, and crew, and just around Mother's Day weekend for 2 weekends. And it'll be great, so come on out.
Thank you very much. Trustee Leclerc.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So we've heard a lot about different types of announcements tonight about different events and different celebrations. Yesterday was Family Day in Ontario, but for some people and for some jurisdictions, such as Manitoba, it's Louis Riel Day. And for some of us, we prefer to celebrate Family Day as Louis Riel Day. So I just wanted to point that out to those of us that are here.
Thank you very much. And Trustee Nelson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Today, our Bangladesh community this morning at Charles Clark Square did the International Mother Language Day flag raising. And so just wanted to say that that was a wonderful event and very grateful to have been invited.
Thank you. I forgot about that one on my list. Thank you very much. Any other announcements? Trustee Burgess?
Thanks, Madam Chair. Unusual announcement, but it's an announcement of an apology I'd like to make publicly. The December 6th meeting, I was sitting here. Trustee Paige Hawkins was sitting there, and we had many presenters. And it was brought to my attention by somebody who attended, Ms. Haley McLean, that she interpreted my body language, my face behind my mask, and my speaking with Trustee Paige Hawkins as inappropriate and rude. And she was sharing some really, really heavy, intimate, personal information. And it required my silence and full attention. And I was speaking with Trustee Hawkins about that, I thought respectfully, but it couldn't have been interpreted as respectful because it was a conversation while this intimate knowledge was. So I'd like to apologize. I think that I'm going to make a commitment. I'm a terrible interrupter. I speak too much. I doubt my full personality will have a transplant. But I don't do it to be rude, but I know that I can be rude. So while I don't check all the boxes for ADD, my body language, my non-poker face, my whatever, will maybe send a message that's unintentional and it may be also misinterpreted. So I apologize for that, and I hope to keep it in check.
Thank you very much, Trustee Burgess. Trustee Ching?
Thank you, Madam Chair. It brought, make me remind that actually I also have announcement and clarification because last board meeting when I questioned the research of the survey, research of the police program, and I mentioned bias several times. For the research, actually, I want to clarify, it's not disrespectful at all. It's just a technical word. That means, and I'm also kind of a scholar in survey research. My PhD PhD research is on survey research. So we use bias a lot. I never use bias as targeting any group. And the whole purpose is to improve the the survey research because it's important for safety of the campus. I want to protect the kids. I didn't mean to attack anybody. So I got many emails targeting me as anti-black. I have no idea where it comes from. And I never, anti anybody. So I want to clarify that. If anybody misunderstood it, and I apologize, but it's not my intention. So I just want to clarify. Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Chin. Do we have any other announcements for this meeting?
You
Thank
asked
you.
me?
Thank you.
Oh, thank you.
Well, we have come to the end of our agenda. So with that, I would like to thank the trustees. Oh, but I will thank everybody else for attending our public meeting. And we did recess our private session, so we are now going back into private session. Thank you.